business has not only an opportunity but a responsibility to make a positive difference in the world. The great thing about WD-40 is we were able to kind of map the purpose. Our purpose was we existed to create positive, lasting memories, solving problems in factories, homes, and workshops around the world. We solved problems and we created opportunities. So that applied to the customers that we service, the end users that used our product, the tribe members within the tribe, the communities in which we live, and Mother Nature, who gave us permission to be there.
25 years as CEO for a company like WD-40, that's incredible because most CEOs, at best last just a few years on average. What was your secret to that?
I loved what I was doing, number one. And it's a great brand and had lots of opportunity, to be able to work in so many countries around the world and enjoy so many cultures. And I guess we performed okay, so the board didn't fire me, right?
Yeah, so you grew it probably 7-8-fold in your tenure there in terms of total value, right?
In total value, 10 times, basically. We took the market cap from about 300 million to, when I left, around 3 billion plus. Sales-wise, about 7x the sales. And we took the brand to 176 countries around the world. So now that blue and yellow can with a little red top sits on shelves in many countries around the world. Still looks the same as it does here, except some of the words are in different languages. But certainly an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, I believe if I got the stat right, it's in 8 out of 10 households
in the United States. Yes.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I've gone through lots of those cans. So when I was a kid, I used to race motorcycles. I worked on my own vehicles, and what an amazing product. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I know you're an avid player of guitars. You told me you have 50. One of the uses that we were told was people using it on steel guitar strings. I don't know if you've ever done that.
I haven't. I play very aggressively. Whenever I play live, I have to change my strings every day or they'll break because I'm bending.
Yeah.
So I don't have the corrosion issue, but I could see where it actually really help and kind of bring life back into them again.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. No question. Culture is a really big deal to you. It's really big to me. I feel like there's so much talk about culture and engagement that to me sounds like business virtue signaling.
Mm-hmm.
More than something meaty you can really sink your teeth into. And I'm a believer that the goal of every organization should be to connect culture to creating value. That's how I look at it, and making it come to life. And you talk in your book about, and I've heard you on a number of podcasts, love the micro interview that you did, a tribal culture. So maybe let's start there and how you came up with that, and then how you made culture come to life. And it wasn't just something that looks good, feels good, and sounds good, but actually created great performance too.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. Number one, I think business has not only an opportunity, but a responsibility to make a positive difference in the world. And it's sad, and the latest Gallup numbers, or the ones that came out in January, sort of verified this, that in the United States, engagement in organizations has dropped to 31%, which means, 69% of people who go to work every day are disengaged. This doesn't make sense to me, because I think success in an organization is what I call the will of the people times strategy. So we can have a great strategic plan, right? Write it up, take it to some smart professor, and he says, congratulations, you got 70 out of 100 for your strategic plan. You hit on all the right places. But if only 30% of your people are going to work every day engaged and enthusiastically executing against that plan, that's like 30 times 70 is a number, which means you're not really getting value out of the execution. But if 80% did, then 80 times 70 is a much bigger number. And that's why it sort of baffles me that leaders don't get it, that it's not just about strategy, it's about the power of execution. So if you go back then to think about, what really do people want? Well, we worked out that there are a couple of things. People want to go and work at a place where they feel and are treated like they belong. We learned that from Maslow in Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization. The first two rungs of that is, am I safe, and am I, providing for myself? The next one is love or belonging. So hey, you need to create that. The second one is people want to go to work at a place where what they do matters and is being recognized. It's making a difference. Thirdly, people want to go to a place where there's psychological safety, a reduction in fear. And we did that by taking the word failure out of our organization and replacing it with learning moments. And the number one responsibility of a tribal leader is to be a learner and a teacher. That's why we're there. And then people want to be at a place where they're free to make decisions. And that's why a hierarchical set of values is so important, because people want sort of guardrails, if you will, to be able to operate in, but they don't want to be quacking up the hierarchy every time they need to make a decision. So if you put all those things in place, they're the attributes of a tribal culture. Now, when I talk about tribes, I'm not talking about some indigenous group. Tribalism goes way back to the beginning of mankind. Ugg the caveman was a tribal guy. So, and then finally, tribes have just causes. And our just cause was a group of people that came together to protect and feed each other. That's why we went to work every day. So you wrap all that up, and that was really the basis behind, or the thinking behind a tribe.
Yeah. And I love the example in the book. If a team member asks you, how are you doing? What they're really asking is, am I going to be okay in the organization with the way things are at? And I found the numbers incredibly high from a percentage standpoint. So I actually wrote them down out of the book. When you do a survey and you had a few questions on there, I love to tell people that I work at WD-40 company, 98%. Incredible. I am excited about WD-40 company's future direction, 94%. I know what results are expected of me, 96%. In my experience, and I work with hundreds of companies, it's less than 30%. They're really clear. And I respect my coach. So that was 97%. Just incredible. So you must have been super intentional about how you operationalized things around that, especially expectations.
Yeah. An earlier book that I wrote with my mentor, Dr. Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager, was called Helping People Win at Work. And the whole basis was, we're not here to mark your paper, we're here to help you get an A. So our philosophy was, are we clear about what an A looks like? So we would intentionally, at the beginning of the year, sit with those we had the privilege to lead as their coach, and we would agree what an A looks like. If it walked in the door today, what would it look like? And then my role as the coach was to help you get that A. So we didn't wait till the end of the year to have that conversation. We'd have ongoing conversations. Lee, where do you think you are? What's getting in your way? What roadblocks are you're encountering? What do you need? What training do you need? Now, that's why 97% of people respected their coach. Because when we asked them why, they said, the coach is here to help me win. Now, remember, their coach, in other terms, is their manager or their boss. Most people leave organizations because they hate their boss or they don't respect their boss. The 97% of our people, as you quoted, respected the coach because the coach was there to help them step into the best version of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. Of the 8 companies I started, the biggest one I sold, we had over 500 team members, and I spent the majority of my time developing the 64 leaders inside the business. That was my job, and it's been pretty cool. And that was almost 10 years ago. It's been cool watching them go get big jobs in other companies. It's so cool. And I thought you'd get a kick out of this. So about 6-7 years ago, my team gave me this coffee cup that says "Candid but Caring."
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it shows up, and you talk a lot about that. And I was intrigued by, the 4 pillars of a friction-free culture: care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. I don't I'm trying to really get my head around the friction free, because I think there's a lot of opportunity and struggle, like all of that goes on. So there can be some healthy friction that goes on there. So talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, there's always going to be, we strive for friction free. And I guess it aligns really with WD-40 because we actually reduce friction. But, those 4 pillars are really important. The care one is we love and care about our people enough, not only to reward them and applaud them for doing great work, but here's the rub. We're brave enough to redirect them, or not protecting our own comfort zone at the expense of their development. And that's where a lot of leadership falls down, because expectations or A's aren't clear. That redirection conversation becomes a very uncomfortable conversation, particularly for this person delivering it. So you probably choose not to have it. And, that's really, sad, because we're not doing what we should do, which is helping that person win. The candor one I love: no lying, no faking, no hiding. I believe most people don't lie in businesses. I believe they fake and they hide. And the reason they fake and hide is because of fear. There's a very low psychological safety. I'm not going to step out on that limb because I'm afraid of, the consequences. Accountability is, are we clear about, what an A looks like? And then the responsibility one is really interesting. We created something, and you probably read it, called the Maniac Pledge. And our learning from that is you have to give people permission. And this whole Maniac Pledge came about many years ago. I'd been traveling, out and around the world to some of our operations, and I guess I was out for nearly 2 weeks. And I got back to the office one day, and someone comes running up to me and couldn't wait to get into my ear and tell me how they were sort of angry about the fact that there was something they didn't know about. And I said, well, you know what you didn't know. Why didn't you go and find out? And I got this blah, 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 which was basically they were afraid because they didn't have permission. So I said, right, we got to write a permission statement that gives people the responsibility. And the Maniac Pledge, and I can read it to you, is I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I am responsible for telling them. And I jokingly say now, this is the vaccination against a disease that runs in all companies. And I call it the na-na-ni-na-na disease, the finger-pointing disease. So this was very powerful because we gave people permission.
Yeah, I think that's pretty incredible. When you talk about values set people free, what do you mean by provided freedom by a set of values? How does that? Talk through that? Yeah.
So we have a hierarchical set of values. Each one of them had a description of what that behavior or that decision process was. For example, our number 1 value was we value doing the right thing. Our number 2 value was we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. And what we wanted to do is make sure that people had what they needed to make decisions. Like what we realized is as we went around the world, the sun was never going to set on our company. Sometime in any day, there would be people live working, wanting to make decisions. So why don't we give them a safe zone to make that decision? And the values were the safe zone. And we said anybody in the company at any level in the organization can make any decision they need to make as long as they reflect on our values when they make that decision. So it empowered them, it protected them, number 1, because now here's what we all agreed to are the values, and it set them free. They didn't have to wait for the sun to rise in San Diego and call up some, body up the hierarchy to make the decision. And we talked about that all the time. In fact, in our conversations with our tribe members, at least every 90 days when we had that check-in, we would ask them to share with us how did they live our values in the last 90 days. Give us real examples of how you did the right thing, how you created a positive, lasting memory, of how you made it better than it is today. So it was really something that is so powerful. And it would not be a meeting or a gathering that would go by where someone would say, well, let's think about our values. How will that align? And it just reduces churn so much. In fact, finally, you mentioned I was teaching at USD. I used to do a simulation with my class there. I'd give them a case study that had a bunch of twists and turns in it, and I would divide the class into three. The first group, I said, and then I'd say, you need to come back in 30 minutes and give us your recommendation. The first group, I said, you have a hierarchical set of values to use to make the decision. Here's your values. The second group, I'd say, you have a set of values, but they're not hierarchical. So, you can work out what you want to do. The third group, I said, you can do anything you want. Now, that group got excited. I can do anything I want. Yay. Be back here in 30 minutes. In every case, and I've run this dozens of times, the first group back with the group that had a hierarchical set of values because they didn't spend their time debating amongst themselves what was important to them. They came back, they were smiling, and they had a concise recommendation. The second group back was the group that had a set of values, but they weren't hierarchical. And they were still a little unsure about what they wanted because someone said this value is more important than that. And then they came back and it was a bit wishy-washy. The third group, I'd have to go out and call them back into the classroom. Some of them were angry and arguing. They did not have a recommendation. So a hierarchical set of values also reduces churn and helps build trust within teams because they're not arguing their gifted point of view.
Yeah, it's a great example of operationalizing, certain aspects of culture. So what I'm getting out of what you're saying, it's rules of engagement. It's a decision filter for everything we do. I love that order matters. And I think it's number 5. We value owning it and passionately acting on it. The other side of it. One of the, let me back up a little bit. I see a lot of situational sort of morality and ethics when it comes to money and how things, work, and having that clear set of, values or behaviors really is how it seems to be laid out. I think helps with that. And I think one of the biggest deficits on the planet is enough capable leaders that are both capable and moral. And I liked what you said about, have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. And probably one of the best, maybe the best unsolicited, I took it as a compliment I've ever gotten. It was quite a few years ago, but a team member said, and I'd worked with this guy for a long time. He said, Lee, everybody knows that you really care about them and they know that you'll make the tough calls and you won't let people skate by. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm going to hold them accountable to their end of the bargain. I'm keeping my end of the bargain. And I thought that was fantastic. So what's your view on that? Because I think most of the trouble companies get into, governments get into, is where we have leaders that aren't capable of creating the value they were hired to create, and they've got some situational morality issues depending on power or money.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, I talk about, creating culture is like, when I was in high school, my science teacher gave me a petri dish and they said, we're going to create culture in this petri dish. And the science teacher said the two things you've got to be really focused on is what are the ingredients you put in there and how are you going to manage that petri dish? And you've got to be feeding the good ingredients and you've got to be brave enough to attack the toxins. And I think what you're referring to are these toxins in organizations that people, and Lee is a great sales guy and a terrific performer, but he's a really bad person and he treats people badly. But he's still here because all that matters is him getting the sales. Well, that's just cancer in an organization because people say, well, I know what behavior looks like around here. And, if I'm doing that or if I'm, quacking up to the right person, I can get away with anything. And so the whole thing falls apart. And, fish rots from the head, Lee.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we don't set a great example, what does that do to productive engagement that we're talking about? The will of the people will accomplish, our strategy, where we're going, accelerate the value of the business, all of it. Um, and then, so the why, a lot talk about that. Simon Sinek talks about it. A number of leaders, leadership gurus talk about it. So important. There's the company purpose. There's the individual purpose. How to marry those two together and figure it out. For example, my purpose in life right now is to drive holistic value creation behaviors in the world. And so I work with for-profits, nonprofits. I work with families. I have over 40,000 parents in my dinner table family community. I want to take it to millions over the next few years, because kids are going to be running the world we age out in. I want it to be amazing, not some strange dystopian future. So, purpose, I think, is really important. But I think it's really hard to get people's heads around, and mine's evolved over decades. How do you think about corporate purpose, individual purpose, getting that right, for the organization?
Well, I think it's really important. I had to rewrite my purpose statement when I stepped down as CEO of WD-40 Company. And my purpose now is I help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happy, more connected world. And I use that filter for everything that I do. So it keeps me grounded and going in the direction I want to go in. The great thing about WD-40 is we were able to kind of map the purpose. Our purpose was we were existed to create positive, lasting memories, solving problems in factories, homes, and workshops around the world. We solved problems and we created opportunities. So that applied to the customers that we service, the end users that used our product, the tribe members within the tribe, the communities in which we live, and Mother Nature, who gave us permission to be there. And then our second value, of course, was we exist to create positive, lasting memories. So it was kind of linked. If you think about it, the purpose doesn't have anything to do with the functionality of the product. We didn't say our purpose was to stop squeaks, but we were able to question ourselves all the time. Will this product innovation actually create a positive, lasting memory? And if we couldn't demonstrate that or identify it, we wouldn't do it. Would what we did in the community create a positive, lasting memory? If it didn't, we didn't do it. So again, we made it simple and easy to understand, but people could connect to it, which was so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Did you have any issues with folks coming up with their own purpose, or is that really what you're saying? They had a purpose that connected the two together?
Yeah, I think that, over time, we attracted the people who wanted to be in an organization like ours. We grew our employee base sixfold over that period of time. And, if you went on our careers page on our website, the first thing that flared up at you is these are our values and this is what we stand for. And we basically said, if this is not comfortable for you, don't apply, because you're not going to feel, because people don't want to have some people don't want to be responsible. They don't want the sort of culture that we have, and that's okay. And they need to be happy somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get them a job at our strongest competitors. Right?
Yeah, I used to say we would share them with a competitor.
Yeah, we would, and I still do this today with my businesses, measure everybody objectively on culture as well as performance. And if you're really high in performance and low in culture because somehow you got through the filters, I would tell everybody, if you can get them a job at our strongest, most admired competitor, I'll give you a parking space. If it's a senior leader, I'll shift position. I'll give you a car to go into the parking space, because they can go kind of suck the life force out of those companies and stop doing it to what we're doing here, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of my things I would say all the time. It's interesting though, if by chance someone got under the fence and into the tribe and they weren't aligned with the culture, the tribe would vote them off the island. They would that person would actually end up feeling very uncomfortable. In a lot of cases, they would decide to go somewhere else because they just were not comfortable in that environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm big on passionately talking about where we're going, why we're going there, getting everybody engaged in productive conversations and actions to do it. But also in a big way, what's in it for them. And the approach I've always taken is, hey, whatever we create as in terms of value for the business, whatever's left over, here's a pretty big percentage that all of you get to divide up proportionate to your income. So if it's 10%, 15%, 20% of total payroll, that's your bonus. No matter what you made, that's what you get. And so that was a self-policing effort on our end too. If somebody slipped through the cracks, the team members wouldn't want them in there. They when I put that in place, probably late 90s, they would stop recommending family members and friends that they just wanted to help get a job. Now they'd bring people on that they thought would contribute to their family's income.
Yeah, right. We had a very similar plan. It was called the growth reward plan, and you could earn a percentage of your base salary based on our performance, and it was distributed, and people, liked that, and it was a true motivator.
Yeah. In driving the culture. So how many team members when you started? And you said you grew it tenfold from there. Was it?
We had when I left about 600, so we had about 100 when I started.
About 100 and then 600. Yeah.
Based in 17 different countries around the world. Now, the reason we had such a low direct employee, we had revenue per employee of approaching $1 million per employee, is because we outsourced all our manufacturing. So if we were doing our own manufacturing, we had thousands of employees, but instead we had 13 or 14 manufacturing partners around the world, a bit like Coke. We manufactured the secret sauce. WD-40, the base product, has a concentrate that we manufactured. And then we shipped that to the contract packagers who made it according to our demand signals. And then we took it into our distribution center, and then we shipped it out to our customers.
Yeah. And I still view that as you're supporting thousands of jobs, outsourcing everything that goes along with it. When it comes to maintaining culture, so I've never really had an issue maintaining a positive culture where everybody, for the most part, acts like the CEO of their own role, as long as I intentionally do these things that we're talking about. Did you have challenges maintaining your culture in all the different countries?
No, because we had our people own it. When we got our employee opinion survey feedback, we were able to dice it and splice it, by country, by operating unit, whatever. And, we'd say, well, here are the top 5 results and here are the bottom 5 results. Now, you need to fix the bottom 5. I can't wave a magic wand on this. And they would want to fix it. And I have a dear friend of mine. His name's Charlie Maloof. He owns a chain of Ashley furniture stores out in Carolina, in Charlotte. And he has a wonderful saying. He says, culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crockpot approach. And it's so true. I couldn't sprinkle fairy dust on a division and have their culture improve. And then we also held the leadership accountable. We wanted them to come back and say, what's your action plan? If, there's something going on in your operating unit or your, in your office or your branch, what are you going to do about it? Show us the true act. You need to fix this. So, accountability was really important, and people were proud. They wanted to be the best, office. So you'd have the Spanish competing against the French and the Germans and, whatever. So it was really, really something that we all coveted, actually. And we talked about it all the time. They knew, our senior leadership group took this really seriously. It wasn't like, well, we're just going to have these values and culture, we'll stick it up on the wall and wave at it occasionally. No, we were living this thing on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I think that's a pretty good lesson, because I'll hear a number of leaders say, well, if you're remote, it can't be as good as if you're in person. And I think you can drive it anywhere with it, whatever mix you absolutely have. And I've heard you talk about examples of how your team members are applying things to actually create more value for the business. And what I've done, with hundreds of employees, again, the biggest one, over 500 team members, is every 6 months, each one of them would have one example or more, if they wanted, how they applied each of our alignment tools to measurably improve the business, customer experience, internal, external, profitability, cash flow. And so those alignment tools, I'll remember them until I'm not here anymore because they're in my bones. All of them, we even had a purpose for each alignment tool. Like, why did we have a mission? How would it make us more successful? Our behaviors, what were we trying to accomplish by having those? We wrote that first, got every team member appropriately involved in creating them. And then we had to have examples because I could care less if somebody knew it. I want to know that you can actually apply it, or it is just expensive wallpaper, right?
Yeah. Well, we used to have two measures of our values. You either live them or visit them. And we didn't want a lot of visitors, is how we would explain it.
I love that. And most companies don't operationalize it that way. Was it a leadership tool, which it totally can be in conversations, or was it part of ongoing? I call them performance snapshots because everybody should know where they stand 100% of the time. But performance reviews, or how did you operationalize
all
them beyond
all of the above? We mandated that at least every 90 days, you would sit down with the people that you have the privilege to lead. You would review where they say there are against getting their A goals, and you would talk about the values. And each one of those interactions, the person that you had the privilege to lead would share with you doing the right thing. This is how I lived it in the last 90 days. This is actually what I did. Positive, this is actually what I did. So, over time, it just became, a normal embedded thinking in our operations. And again, we would be talking about it all the time. The things that we talked about all the time were coaches, learning moments, maniac, pledge, and values. And it was part of us. It was kind of embedded in our fabric all the time.
Yeah, in the learning moment piece, so we most companies look at it and say, "Hey, we made a mistake." Employees would kind of run from that. We develop a bit of a fear culture. It can happen around it, as opposed to a learning moment, a different perspective. So that's okay to a point. They can't bet the farm, and so a couple things. Describe what you mean by learning moments and the power of it, but also how did you earn sort of decision rights, autonomy, authority, all that? Because I've always found I had to, watch folks and let them earn it over time. I couldn't just give them full decision-making rights right out of the gate. So how did you work through that?
Well, let's go to the definition of a learning moment. A learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. So, you doing something and you had a positive learning moment, you need to share it. You had a negative learning moment, you need to share it. And that became part of our conversation. I had a learning moment, I'm sharing it, blah, blah, blah. Decision rights go right back to the values. You can come to the company on day one, and as long as you use our values, now, what it does take is the education around what that means. And obviously, the longer people are there, the more comfortable. But then, of course, different parts of the organization had different, approval and decision-making rights anyhow. That's just standard practice in a public company. This is your playground. If you're in marketing, you don't have a decision right in the supply chain. Or you may influence it, but whatever. So, but the learning moment, and here's the interesting thing, how it all tied in. WD-40 was born because of learning moments. It wasn't called that back then. Back in 1953, the company was called Rocket Chemical Company. It was a fledgling company based in San Diego. Probably had 5 employees. There was a problem with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket. The chemists got together and in their kitchen basically started to mix up solutions for this problem of condensation in the Atlas space rocket. Well, guess what? Formula 1 didn't work, nor did 5 or 15 or 25 or 32 or 39, but 40 worked. So that's why it's called water displacement WD-40. So, that was a great benefit to us because we could talk about learning moments. And it was really, and in our building in San Diego, when we remodeled, there was a stairwell that went from down to the lower level to the first floor. And I had them mark the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and up to 39. And the top step said success. So, they were reminded daily that, our success was built on the fact that we took a learning moment and then we improved on it to get to the next spot.
Yeah, I think when we go through that enough times, we just know we're going to win if we stay in the game. I mean, there's signs that say we're going in the right direction or not, but I love that. I forget what chapter it was, but it was, curiosity attracts a lot more customers. So it's kind of the same thing there. I think a lot of companies love their stuff more than their customers do, and they don't have the feedback loops. But you could give a master class on that, obviously. So talk about that.
Yeah, that was fun. I think you're talking about the time when I was actually in China. I was working a trade show stand in China, and one of the things that has been cornerstone to WD-40 success is a free sample of the product. So you give a free sample out, and it's basically, here's my product. This is what it does. Please try it. If you like it, I'd love you to buy it. So I'm on this stand in Beijing, and I'm trying to give out samples. And the Chinese word for sample is yang ping, and the word for lubricant is lunhua. So I'm lunhua yang ping, lunhua yang ping, lunhua, and people are just walking by, and I'm thinking, what the hell? I asked my Chinese mates there, is my pronunciation that bad? They said, no, you're pretty good. And I thought, why don't they want my WD-40? And I look out of the corner of my eye and I see a motor stand, a car motor stand with a line of people. And it looks like they're giving away a brown paper bag with a string on it. And I thought, I got to find out what's in that bag. So I went over and I had a look, and I look in the bag. There's nothing in the bag. And I thought, why are people lining up to get a paper bag with a string handle on it, and they don't want my WD-40? I've got something useful. Anyhow, my learning moment was that bag was seen as having a lot of value because it was about the size that they used to take it down to the local, providing store and get rice or whatever. So it had a value. So I got back to the stand, and I said to the guys, we got to find out why, our product doesn't add value. So we do some intercepts real quick. And what we learned was they didn't want lubricant. They had dirty diesel oil. Lubricant didn't matter to them. But what we learned was that rust was a problem. Now, interestingly enough, WD-40 also stops corrosion. We are an anti-rust oil. So we changed the delivery. Instead of saying, here's a sample of oil, we said, here's a sample of anti-rust oil, or something that will stop corrosion. Within minutes, we had to have security guards on the stand to stop people pushing us over to get the sample. Exactly the same product. But what we were curious enough to find out what was the end user's need and then communicate that to them. I could have walked out of there saying, oh, well, there's no future for WD-40 in China.
That's incredible. Do you have a list of the number of applications? I mean, I'm assuming you do. Is it 100? Is it 500 applications? It takes gum off your shoe. I mean, it does so many different things. Is there a total number of applications?
Yeah. If people want to go to the WD-40 company website, there's a list of 2,000 uses for WD-40. And we got those uses from our end users. Back in the year 2000, we ran a sweepstakes and asked people to tell us their favorite use for WD-40. We got over 200,000 entries, and we were able to distill that down to 2,000 actual suggested uses for the product.
That's incredible. Just incredible.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, back to culture for a little bit. There's a lot of ways that we can show up as a CEO or just leaders in general that harm the culture, the productive engagement is how I like to think about it. And, you talk about in the book not becoming essentially too full of yourself. And you talk about your dumbassery can be your superpower, is your superpower. Talk about the success of looking at it through that lens and showing up that way. And just to set it up, I've thought for decades, probably started maybe early 90s. Everything I do is going to be what's best for the entity. And that will ultimately be what's best for me. And I think it all goes into that same bucket, but that's not how a lot of leaders show up.
Well, I think again, I used to introduce myself as, G'day, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right, chairman and CEO of WD-40 company, and I need all the help I can get. And just by saying that, people were, willing to help. And I invented this guy. You read about him in the book. This is Alec, Smart Alec, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated, or it could be Alice. And this leadership behavior of this person creates toxic cultures. They have a big ego. Their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. They're a micromanager. They've got to have their fingers in everything. They think they're corporate royalty. You'll never find them in the stinky locker room, as I call it, or in the canteen or cafeteria. Someone brings them coffee if they can get through their locked door in the office. They for some reason want a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know-it-all. They have all the answers, and even the wrong ones, Lee. They don't value learning so much because they think they're so smart. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they're not that reliable. They don't keep their commitments as much as they should. They're a lot of talk. On the offside of that, a servant-based leader loves and involves their people. They're always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent. They have high emotional intelligence. They want to spend time with the people, listening to the people. They have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel, as I said, or, a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted is really important. They're champions of hope. Then they know micromanagement is not scalable. They do what they say they're going to do, and they cherish the gift of feedback. There's the difference, as I see it, as what you want to be as a leader.
Yeah. Do you think those that are the Alec type that you're talking about, they're doing it because they think this is the best way to be successful, or is it insecurity based, or what's going on there? Because clearly what you advocate for gets way better long-term results.
Yeah, what I've learned, now, as you know, I coach CEOs. I currently coach 9 CEOs, both public companies and private companies. And what I've learned is, in most cases, they're not aware of how their behavior is negatively impacting people. So in my coaching work, the first thing I do is awareness. Are you aware of how you're impacting others? Because I don't think the majority of leaders get up every day wanting to actually not motivate people, but they just don't know. Now, some of them who are serial narcissists can't get through it at all. I mean, there's that group, but I think that's a very small percentage. And, once you make them aware of the behavior and how it's affecting others, it's like, wow, okay, how do we change that? How do we do that? And I admit, I probably had most of Alec's behaviors at some level of competency way back in my time. And until I did my master's degree in leadership and learned the power of servant leadership, I wasn't really aware of, okay, I don't need to be that person. I need to be someone different. And I intentionally changed my behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing that, and I've thought a lot about this over the years, when I hear people say, and you've said this too, and I think we're really running at it the same way, just we're saying it differently. Our job is to make people happy. I figured out a long time ago, well, I can't control how somebody feels, but I can create the environment from which they create value, from which fulfillment comes. And I don't personally think we can all be happy all the time. We go in and out of it, but I do think internal fulfillment can gradually and steadily climb year after year. We're doing the right stuff. So I landed on, as a group of leaders, myself driving it. And I've always thought of myself as the head of HR. I'm going to create the environment from which everybody creates value. I'm going to do the best I can to constantly improve it. And they get to choose how they feel, but I'm going to do everything I can to make it an incredible, fulfilling environment for them where they can really grow. So are we saying the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I say I want to send people home happy. I'm not naive to the fact that you can't be happy all the time, but I wanted an organization people escaped to, not escaped from. And here's the other reason why I think it's important. Think of a man or a woman going home of a night, sitting at the dinner table. with their family around, and they're talking about how they hate their job. I don't like my boss. I don't like going to work. I got to go to work. What message is that sending the young folks? They say, I don't want to do what dad or mom does. Look how miserable they are. But if they're going home and say, hey, I went to work today. People treated me like I was supposed to be there. I did these things and I saw how it mattered. I made some decisions. I had some learning. I felt safe in the environment because my coach wants me to win. Of course, that environment's going to be such different. And what a positive influence on the other people in the company. So, I must admit, in all my time, I don't think there was one day that I got up. I said that I wasn't excited to go and do what I was doing, because I really enjoyed it, and I love seeing the people in the organization. Now, that didn't mean that there weren't hard times. There were, no doubt. We've all been through hard times, had to make tough decisions or whatever. But as you said, if we make those decisions in the best interest of the whole business and the people that we have the privilege to lead, that's what's important.
Yeah. I've said this before, and it tells me I'm doing the right work. The team's doing the right work. When the harder it gets, the harder we laugh. And I think that's how you know. And I love how you talk about, being a place to escape too. It should be energizing and fulfilling. And in this epidemic of loneliness that's going on in the world right now, because we be moving away from being part of healthy communities. Well, when I talk about spiritual value creation, it's about connectedness. So all the things that I continue to do today to drive connectedness and strengthening that community of the folks that work in the company, no matter what's going on in their personal lives, I want this to be a source of positive energy going forward. Sounds like you were very similar there.
Yes, totally. I wanted, it was interesting when we were going through COVID. It was January 2021. And we'd been going through, the whole COVID scene for all of that time. And we'd done a lot of things to keep things together and, to make sure that we'd stayed connected. And I said to our team, I want to go out and just test make sure we're not draining cultural equity. So we had some results from our feedback in March, just before COVID. So here we are, January 2021. There's no real sign of the true solution to this issue. There were talk about vaccinations. It was topsy-turvy every day. So we went out and we tested and did some pulse surveys and tested, feeling. The numbers came back, and most of them were about where they were in January, which I thought, wow, that's great. But one went up. And the one that went up was the one that relates to, I'm excited about my place in the company's future. And it came back at 97% of people said they were excited about their place in the company's future. And I said, that can't be true. The data's wrong. People are how can they be excited when the world has no clarity about the future? Check the numbers. So we went and checked the numbers, came back, no, they're right. Find out why. It was probably the defining moment of my career when I heard the answer, because they came back and they said, if I want to be anywhere right now, I want to be here because I feel safe. And I thought, well, we've proven that this is true because people feel safe. We created the safety.
Yeah, you must have done a really good job of consistently telling all the team members, this is where we're at, this is where we're going, with no surprises.
Yeah, we tried that. When COVID hit, I like things simple. I said, we have 3 objectives. Number 1, the health and well-being of our people is our first objective. Number 2, to serve our customers as best we can when we can. Number 3, to do what we need to do to protect the underbody of the organization so we can thrive when this is over. We will use those 3 things in that order to make every decision until this is over. And we talked about it all the time. And we did. And interestingly enough, luck was on our side at that time because people had a lot of time on their hands. They did a lot of stuff. So where we could supply, our revenue just skyrocketed because they were riding their bikes more and fixing stuff at home, So, it was, I called it isolation renovation was what I called it. People were isolated, so they were renovating at the same time. So where we could supply, unfortunately, a lot of the trade channels that we're in were still open because, they were defined as being essential, like hardware stores and automotive stores and whatever. So, we had the best year in the company's history, which was really amazing.
That's incredible. One school of thought is when times get tough, let's shield our team members from that information. I've always leaned into it and got them involved and engaged in helping us work through that. And to that end, I've never had to lay people off or do any of that. And I love that. I mean, I've shut businesses down, a couple of them over time because the model didn't work. But in terms of the going concerns, they were always so helpful. What's your advice there for leaders on leaning appropriately into tough times are coming? Let's all get around it.
Absolutely. I mean, in my 25 years as CEO, we never laid anyone off in any downturn of anything, whether it was but what we did do is we said it's better all of us suffer a little than a few of us suffer a lot. So, know what's going on and how we're going to work through this and how are we going to find way. And we found ways to, it had us do interesting things. I remember in, I think it was 2008, 2009, the recession, so-called, we did a called the Stupid Policies Program. We said, and someone came up with this idea, well, why don't we use this time to work out all the stupid policies we have in the company and get rid of them? Because if they're not adding value, they shouldn't be there. So we went out to read, hey, tell us all the stupid policies we have and let's understand. So people said, I think this policy is stupid. And what we learned was there were two answers. It either was stupid, so we got rid of it. It wasn't effective anymore. It had been sitting around for a while and, or we hadn't really, showed people the value of it and educated them around it. But we used those opportunities to streamline what we did and, to get better. One of our values, make it better than it is today, is okay, how are we going to make it better? So, why should I, carry the burden? Let's all work out what we need to do. And that's what we did.
Yeah, I love that. You use a word I've never really heard used in business before, but discombobulate and then recombobulate. So did you have a discombobulation, recombobulation chart that you tracked and for the company? I talk about that. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, no, I love that word. I mean, and I love the recombobulation zone that I saw at the airport was, and I tell that you've read the story and you watch people going through security and they get discombobulated, take off your shoes, take off your belt, and then you have to go through. And on the other part, they put themselves all back together again. And I think that's something we have to be, aware of in business. We're going to get discombobulated and we have to therefore be recombobulated at times and be aware of it. So I didn't keep a chart. I mean, I think it happened a lot, but.
Yeah, and it's just, but it's what a fun way to think about it. It's expected to happen. We'll get back together. We'll go through these cycles, and not bad. 10-folding the value of the business in 25 years. Super impressive to be able to do that. So obviously it worked. So a couple things I want to talk about before we wrap up here. When you mention in the book, don't just drift off into the void. I remember it was 2011. I'm sure you probably met him over the years, but Jack Welch became my business partner in my consulting company, ETW. And the thing he told me when I sold one of my businesses for a fair amount of money, he says, whatever you do, don't retire. So here we are all these years later, and I'm working harder today, leaning in more than I ever have. And I absolutely don't need to maintain my lifestyle. So I'm finding it wildly rewarding. It's keeping me young. What's your interpretation of don't drift into the void and what's that like for you now?
Well, I totally agree with you. I was fortunate enough to, know Marshall Goldsmith. He's been a friend of mine for years and we're in New York City some time ago and, we're walking along and he said, Garry, I want to give you some advice. And when Marshall Goldsmith says that, the only two words are, yes, Marshall, what is it? And he said, don't float into a void. He said, you're at risk. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I've coached a lot of CEOs in my life and you've been in one place for 25 years as CEO, 35 years with the company. It's part of your life. And if you don't set yourself forward and look to your next purpose, he said it could kill you. And he was right. That's why I rewrote my purpose statement and now, I get up every day and I have a true purpose. He says there's only so many lousy chicken sandwiches and bad golf games you can play, Gary. So, you know, so yeah, that's why I wrote that last chapter, Don't Float In. And I didn't retire. I refired. That's what I talk about. So now, as you know, I coach and I, work around culture and I speak on the subject. I'm on a couple of boards um, and I'm really enjoying the new future after that season of my life. I often say I just completed my 25-year apprenticeship in leadership. Now I need to put it to work.
Mm. Yeah, it's a little bit like once you get your black belt, okay, you're ready to start learning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I actually taught martial arts for a lot of years, and I felt like once you got your 4th degree black belt, you could start learning. But same kind of thing. How do you think about legacy? Because I'm full into legacy mode now. What can I do to eventually leave behind that'll make a dent in a positive way so humanity goes into the future? And I love how you added to the stonemason story. First one's, chipping away, second one's building a wall, third one, the cathedral, but you went to the next level on that. And that's how I'm thinking about it. And it's really important because I want this to be incredible if we can look back in 1,000 years and go, wow, look what we did.
I agree with you. And that's why I wrote the book. I mean, if I can help fill in the number, companies and leaders create better cultures for their people so they actually have an opportunity to go home happy, build better families build better communities build a better world, and we need a better world. So, I can't wave a magic wand, but, I've seen too many people's lives destroyed because they've been in a situation where they've got a toxic culture and it's really affected their mental health. It's killed their self-esteem, all of those things. So that's my legacy. I'm living now to create the legacy, which is helping leaders understand that we can do a better job.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, you and I are on the exact same mission here.
Yeah. Yeah. We're just doing it a little differently.
We are. Yeah. And that's important because everybody hears things a little bit to a lot differently as well.
Yeah, exactly.
If our listeners want to learn more about your work, where can they go?
Yeah, www.thelearningmoment.net is my website, and go to the website and take the dumbass quiz. There's a button at the top there that says quiz, and you can test your level of dumbassery. And the higher the level of dumbassery you have, the better leader you are. And I'll actually send you a playbook of 3 or 4 things you can start working on tomorrow. And then please, if you like, follow me on LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn couple of times a week, and I try to make sure that what I share is valuable, a learning moment, a lesson that I've had, something that I've learned around leadership. So those are probably the best 2 ways.
Okay, love that. And my biggest takeaway from this conversation is just how down to earth you are, and you're just committed to making a difference here. There's no unhealthy ego anywhere that comes out, and that you're setting an example, I think, for every leader. Thank you so much.
Well, Lee, any dumbass can do it.
Okay. I love that. And if you ever make it through Phoenix, you have a free guitar lesson anytime here in my music studio. So let me know.
Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care.
All right. You as well. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, I certainly did. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, show your value to the world.